half the nation suffers from back pain. If it gets really bad, chances are you'll be offered one of these, an epidural injection of Depo-Medrone. But are such injections safe?
Before I was a wife, a mother, full-time working. I was everything, and now it's just all gone.
British doctors are ignoring the fact that the makers never got a license for this use. Now some 200 patients are taking them on. Tonight, World in Action examines the 35-year history of Depo-Medrone and the way it's been given to patients for unapproved uses. And we ask, what could happen if you have a shot in the back?
We're going to do something out of the ordinary. Going to dedicate this one to all the fine people at Upjohn, especially the ladies. I got a gal in Kalamazoo on the point, 96.5.
This is a story of a drug and a drug company. A corticosteroid in common use for 35 years. And a pharmaceutical giant based in Kalamazoo, Michigan, who've taken the profits from its unlicensed use, failed to warn, and fought tooth and nail to avoid blame. Pauline Smith from Hartlepool put her back out at karate with her children. She walked into hospital for a shot of Depo-Medrone in her back. She left in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down.
When he first put the needle in, it was really excruciating pain. And I couldn't believe it. And I told him that I was in great pain. And he just left the needle in me and went over to flick through my notes and have a look at my notes. And by that time I could feel my back, and my back had swollen. I could feel it, you know, where it was. And I kept saying this, I kept telling him, but he didn't take any notice, really.
I think it's terrible. And when you hear how many people have had it done, you just cannot believe it that could happen. I think it should be withdrawn or banned or whatever, or bring it to light and let people know what's happening, because it just can't go on. It just can't.
Pauline plans to sue her health authority and the drug's makers, Upjohn. She's one of about 200 hoping to challenge the validity of this treatment in the courts.
Put a bit of lignocaine up the catheter.
Every year, millions of Britons seek relief from their back pain.
And that's feeding in very, very easily. Is that hurting at all now?
Last year, over 30,000 epidural injections were given. More than half were Depo-Medrone, and this use is increasing. Dr. Peter Evans has given thousands to back sufferers at London's Charing Cross Hospital. These are not the epidurals given in childbirth, but the method is the same.
I think it is a fairly reasonable form of treatment to offer patients with chronic back pain. Epidural steroids have been around for around about 30 years now, and they've been used widely both in this country and around the world. And there's no doubt that many studies have shown that they help patients.
The spinal cord is protected by the bones of the spine itself. The cord is surrounded by a number of membranes. The outer one is the dura, a tough protective sheath. Inside that is the arachnoid membrane, a delicate layer which retains the spinal fluid. It's this fluid which bathes the nerves of the central nervous system, the key to many of the body's vital functions, not the place to put anything toxic. An epidural injection is meant to be placed in the space between the backbone and the dura, outside the tough membrane which protects the spinal cord. Given that Depo-Medrone is not licensed for this use, and that no rigorous tests have shown it is either effective or safe, the question is, why has it become so popular with doctors?
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I got a gal in Kalamazoo.
Depo-Medrone, or Medrol, was developed by the Upjohn Company in the 1950s in their labs in Kalamazoo in Michigan. It was licensed for a small number of uses, and these were the only ones Upjohn were allowed to promote. But Upjohn developed a secondary market for the unlicensed or off-label use of Depo-Medrone for eye disease. Upjohn hadn't done the tests for this use, so couldn't know if the drug worked or if it was safe. And when trouble arose, Upjohn turned their back. They hadn't recommended it.
I am Mr. Jackson, everything's okay.
It was a tactic which was to blow up in their faces in a Chicago courtroom. In 1991, Mayor Proctor was awarded massive punitive damages against Upjohn. He'd become the victim of another off-label use of the drug.
Depo-Medrol is a fairly common drug. It's an anti-inflammatory agent. It's injected into muscles and joints, and is used to treat a number of other diseases. Meyer Proctor is now blind in his left eye. Back in 1983, his eye doctor injected him with Depo-Medrol, but instead of curing his eye disease, the drug cost him his sight.
It was just like a black curtain coming down over this eye. And in about 10 minutes, it was black.
The jury found that the drug was to blame, that Upjohn knew of the dangers and had failed to give proper warnings. It was a line forcefully argued by Barry Goldberg, Proctor's lawyer.
If the product becomes unreasonably dangerous for the use it is being put, not the use for which it was approved, but the use which they know it is being put by the doctors. Their argument is it's up to the doctor to tell the public. The doctor is the one that uses it for this purpose. We never encourage them to do that, which is hogwash.
It was a story that had started in 1959 when New York eye specialist Dr. Robert Coles received a visit from an Upjohn detail man. Dr. Coles wrote back to Kalamazoo,
I am writing to you about your new product, which was described to me by one of your detail men.
Upjohn had provided cash and encouraged Dr. Coles to publish a favorable report about Depo-Medrol. But as Dr. Coles acknowledged, the data that appeared in the paper was selective.
We were unable to use any of our animal experimentations because the results, as you know, were very unsatisfactory.
The animal experiments, normally seen as essential to establish safety, had failed. But remarkably, this fact was not included. Upjohn then ordered 2,000 copies of Coles' paper to be distributed to hospitals across America. But, as they said,
this is not for promotional purposes or any other undignified use.
It was for something completely different. But while Upjohn were taking the profits from this use of Depo-Medrone, doctors raising doubts got a polite rebuff. An internal memo put it this way.
It should be pointed out that it has never been recommended that Depo-Medrol be used in this way.
Myth is created in the minds of the public, but particularly the public, and also the physicians, that, well, if it's on the market, it must be safe and efficacious, and it's okay to use it for this disease or in this way for this remedy, and it's not. And the manufacturer clearly knows that they haven't demonstrated it. So what they do is they say, when they're asked or an inquiry is made, well, we've never approved the product for this purpose. No matter how much they may have their hand in the tar baby, no matter how instrumental they may have been in creating that secondary market, no matter if they created it themselves.
While Upjohn were busy promoting the use of Depo-Medrone for eye complaints, it became extremely popular, with 1 million injections being given each year. But they still had no proof that it was safe. Time to do some basic tests, perhaps. Think again.
It is recommended that tissue tolerance studies in animals not be undertaken unless a request is initiated by marketing.
It should never be permitted that the economic arm of any manufacturer should have the sole responsibility and license whether or not to market a product, because it would be like having, in American way of an expression, the fox watch over the chicken coop. I mean, that is not something you want to be done. The reality is it should be by people that aren't going to be motivated by the almighty buck to the exclusion of the safety of lives of human beings.
When told all this, the Cook County jury decided that Upjohn should pay compensation and the largest amount of punitive damages in the history of Illinois. The appeal judge confirmed the company had been
willful, and wanton.
This meant Upjohn
Showed an utter indifference to or conscious disregard for the safety of others.
Upjohn are still appealing this decision. In the 1970s, Upjohn had also developed the unlicensed use of Depo-Medrone for back pain. They hadn't done rigorous safety tests, and they ignored those who pointed to the dangers.
I felt I was being stonewalled with my comments and my written descriptions and things to the Upjohn Company. I was injecting the rats in the lower part of the spine. A few of the rats became paraplegic immediately or within minutes afterwards. As soon as they had recovered from the anesthesia, they could not move their hind limbs or tail. And that alarmed me.
Appalled by his findings, Dr. Selby begged Upjohn to act.
I wrote to Dr. Stubbs of the Upjohn Company, telling him of my experimental findings, urging that they repeat the experiments in their, what I assume were far better laboratory facilities than mine. Thirdly, to consider issuing a warning or cautionary letter to all the doctors who might make use of Depo-Medrol, warning them of the potential hazards of the drug when used around nerve tissue. I met with no significant or meaningful response, or any kind of response, really, except excuses.
Dr. Selby was fighting against what was already an accepted form of treatment. But Dr. Dewey Nelson in Delaware had also become alarmed.
What we're talking about here is the problem of the doctor's goodwill of wanting to help these desperate patients. And anyone who's listening, who's had a friend or relative with a bad disc operation, and many people will understand what I'm talking about, knows that you'll take anything offered you. And this was offered, and they published a couple of thousand patients, no complications, so they said, and the thing took off without any control.
Dewey Nelson's concern was that Depo-Medrone was being given intrathecally for severe back conditions. An intrathecal injection is one which goes one layer closer to the spinal cord than an epidural. The needle is pushed in between the vertebrae and through the dura, the cord's tough protective sheath. When this happens, the Depo-Medrone is placed in the spinal fluid itself. Concern about this use grew. In 1982, one eminent New York pathologist became involved.
I was asked to review the autopsy material on a gentleman, a middle-aged gentleman, who, because of chronic back problems, had received a single intrathecal injection of Depo-Medrol. The next morning, he woke up completely paralyzed from the waist down. It was clear from my examination of the central nervous system that the only explanation for the changes that I saw were as a tissue reaction, multiple tissue reaction to the toxic effects of the Depo-Medrol injection.
Dr. Nelson had feared for many years that intrathecal Depo-Medrone, far from relieving back pain, was causing a crippling condition called arachnoiditis.
It's devastating. I mean, it's like having a blowtorch in your rectum or up in your genitalia and down your legs, and they live with that day and night. And it's hard to think of anything but that pain. It's very easy to try to take drugs, and after a while you find drugs don't cut into that kind of pain, and you have to go with nothing but your willpower.
In the healthy back, the nerves in the spinal fluid are meant to flow freely and separately like individual hairs. Arachnoiditis causes these nerve hairs to clump together permanently.
Scar tissue in there, where the spinal fluid should be freely circulating as the nerve roots pass, binds it all together and makes it like spaghetti, like gunky cooked spaghetti. And as the years go on, that draws tighter and tighter and causes more and more complications.
In 1963, Upjohn did apply to have Depo-Medrone licensed for intrathecal use, but in 1969 they withdrew the application. Having done this, Upjohn could no longer promote this use. Yet, later that year, the United States Food and Drug Administration felt the need to write to Upjohn about an exhibit and press release praising the virtues of intrathecal injections. This was in suspected violation of the Food, Drug and Cosmetics Act. Upjohn insisted this was not promotion, it was scientific and educational. In the end, Dewey Nelson's pressure paid off. In 1978, Upjohn put a sentence in the US data sheets. To his distress, this read simply, "Arachnoiditis has been reported following intrathecal administration." This was not enough for Dr. Nelson. With more cases coming to light, he wanted Upjohn to warn doctors individually.
I presume they knew the heavy users and they could have contacted them through the drug representatives who visit every doctor from time to time. Those drug representatives I recommended should have visited the doctors. And I thought that that would be a bold-faced warning, a Dear Doctor letter, and a visit to the heavy users is what I pleaded for.
The company explained its reluctance by pointing out that they weren't recommending this use. But if doctors wanted to use it, well, that was up to them.
Oh, that looks like porencephallic cavity, really.
Yet in 1977, 8 years after Upjohn's interest in the intrathecal use of Depo-Medrone had officially ended, a letter from this man revealed the company's true position. Dr. David Weslowski was a young radiologist at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. He believed that Depo-Medrone had been the victim of a bad press and that the drug prevented arachnoiditis. He wrote to Upjohn asking for funding for a study into intrathecal use, not forgetting to point out, in his words, the potential benefits to the Upjohn company as a result of increased use.
Years have gone by.
This letter inspired an internal memo back in Kalamazoo.
The attached letter is self-explanatory. The study should probably be done, if for no other reason, to help neutralize some of the stuff being published by Dewey Nelson.
Strange, given Upjohn's lack of interest in this use. Furthermore, Weslowski came up with some unexpected results.
We were quite surprised that early on it became very evident that Depo-Medrol not only did not prevent the arachnoiditis, but in fact appeared to greatly enhance the formation of the arachnoiditis.
While many clinics stopped using it, Upjohn took another 3 years to put a warning in the American data sheets and a further 9 years to warn or make it contraindicated in Britain. But there were still no letters to doctors.
They don't want to send out a Dear Doctor letter. That would be like an automotive manufacturer saying there's a defect in our car, bring it back in. I mean, once you get the image in the mind of a would-be user that this product isn't safe, something that you're going to physically consume in your body, people aren't going to use it. So they don't want to do anything to rock the boat with the doctor.
But doctors simply shifted to epidural injections, another off-label use of the drug without the backing of thorough safety tests. With an epidural, the greatest risk is of the needle going too far and the injection becoming intrathecal after all. Even doctors may not be aware of the risks. Ironically, one such doctor became a victim of his own treatment.
I received what was intended to be an epidural injection. Accidentally, the needle punctured the dura. Therefore, the Depo-Medrol, instead of being placed in the epidural space, was placed intrathecally. It's a terrible, disabling disease characterized by constant, intense pain that affects all areas of your life, and is very difficult to cope with. Chronic pain is the most destructive thing that I can think of, and it makes life sometimes not even worthwhile living.
Dr. Celso Coley had given many Depo-Medrone epidurals himself. Then he had one for a minor back problem. And he can see from his before and after slides the arachnoiditis caused by the drug.
I will have to say very sincerely that people should not have that done. This is a procedure that has a higher risk that is commonly known. And I think it's important to make people aware of the potential risks.
Dr. Coley is desperate for doctors to hear his message. But assuming it gets through, how much is a patient told back at Charing Cross?
At the present time, the company that manufactures the drug does not have a product license for this particular purpose. In other words, they haven't been to the Committee on Safety and Medicines to get approval for its administration. But of course,
some doctors may tell their patients that Depo-Medrone is not licensed for use in this way, but the potential side effects are rarely spelt out.
I think the nature of informed consent is that you need to present to the patient a fair and balanced view of what treatments you are offering, and you should be able to explain that in a simple manner. There are isolated reports of patients suffering paralysis, and I think it has been suggested they might develop arachnoiditis from intrathecal administration. I don't think there is evidence that this has happened from epidural administration. And because the incidence is extremely small, I feel that it's unreasonable to increase the patient's anxiety by telling them of this fact. I work also on the basis that, would I receive this treatment myself? Would I be happy to have it? And I have to say categorically, yes, I would very happily have this treatment if I had acute sciatica.
But the risks are unquantified. As late as 1982, Upjohn actually applied to have Depo-Medrone licensed for epidural use in Australia. The authorities there weighed up the evidence. The benefits were outweighed by the risks of serious problems. Yet doctors in Australia and elsewhere are still able to use Depo-Medrone in epidurals. As Upjohn told World in Action this week, it is for doctors to use their training, knowledge and experience to weigh carefully the likely benefits of a medication against the anticipated risks. But a doctor's knowledge depends on where he lives. Upjohn's warnings have appeared here later than the US, but that's only half the story. In Britain, Upjohn's data sheet has, since 1990, stressed that Depo-Medrone must not be given by the intrathecal route. And epidural use is not recommended. But we bought some Depo-Medrone in the Philippines yesterday, and in the data sheet, intrathecal use is still not contraindicated. And epidural use doesn't get a mention.
All of this, let me tell you, is perfectly amenable to simple, straightforward experiments to explore all of these questions and answer them once and for all. I am frankly amazed that this has been going on for 15 or 20 years, and the literature is still contentious, even polemical, and is unscientific in the way that these things have been performed.
In Britain, with epidural use increasing, people are still waiting.
You just take day by day, really. I thought I was just going to come out of hospital and pick up where I left off and be a housewife, but it doesn't happen like that.
Oh, what a cat!